Okay guys, so I thought it would be good to maybe make a video that gives you a little bit of a refresh on long division of polynomials. I know that this can be a tedious process, so I'm just going to walk through an example, so if you ever forget how to do it, you can refer to this video and hopefully that will help. I have a problem here. We have a quartic polynomial here, and that's going to be our dividend. That's the thing that's getting divided. And over here we have a quadratic divisor. Okay, so one thing you might realize or notice with the dividend is we seem to be missing an x cubed term. You don't have to do this, but I really recommend that when you go to start your long division, you put in a 0 placeholder for that. I just think it helps you stay organized. I think you're less likely to make a mistake with your subtraction later on, so that would be my recommendation. Luckily though, in our divisor we don't have any missing terms, so we can go ahead and just write it as we see it. So the first step to long division is that you really only look at the x squared, the first term of the divisor, and the first term of the dividend. The other stuff will come into play later, but for right now, that's all we look at. And we want to ask ourselves the question, x squared times what gets me x to the fourth? So I have a little, just, this is visually what I'm thinking. X squared times this question mark gets me x to the fourth. And hopefully you would say, oh, that's got to be x squared. And notice where I write that. I write that x squared right over the x squared term of the dividend. And I do that because I think it helps us again stay organized, and it also tells me just how big to make my next set of parentheses, because we're going to get ready to do some subtraction. We have to subtract this whole thing away. Now the question is, well, what goes in there? You take x squared and you multiply it by every term of your divisor. So this is when all the terms come into play. So that is x squared times x squared is x to the fourth. X times x squared is x cubed. And then 1 times x squared is x squared. And we have to subtract that away. So be very careful with your subtraction. X to the fourth minus x to the fourth cancels. 0x cubed minus x cubed. That is a negative x cubed. 2x squared minus x squared is just an x squared. And then I always recommend that you bring down any remaining terms. So we're going to repeat this process. Again, only looking at the first term here and only looking at the first term there. X squared times what gets me negative x cubed. X squared times what gets me negative x cubed. That would have to be a negative x. And again, I'm writing that right over the x term. So, repeat that process. Make your parentheses go all the way out to the x term. You're going to subtract something away from what's above it. And what goes in here is determined by you taking negative x, the answer you just wrote, and multiplying it by every term of the divisor. So that would be a negative x squared, negative x cubed, a negative x squared, and a negative x. Now we have a lot of minus signs and negative signs floating around in here, so be very careful. Negative x cubed minus a negative, that's going to become a plus sign really, and it will actually cancel with the x cubed. X squared minus a negative, that also cancels. So we don't have anything there. And then that does not cancel. That gets us, I didn't follow my own advice. X squared minus a negative, that becomes plus, that's 2x squared. X minus a negative x becomes a 2x. And then I'm going to bring down my minus 2. Okay. Again, we're going to repeat the process. Look at x squared, look at 2x squared, and ask yourself, x squared times what gets me 2x squared? and that would be a 2. So put a 2 up there. I put it right over the number of the dividend. That tells me how big to make my parentheses. And what I put in here is us taking 2 times the divisor. So 2 times x squared is 2x squared. 2 times x is 2x. And 2 times 1 is 2. So 2x squared minus 2x squared, that cancels. 2x minus 2x, that cancels. Be careful here though, negative 2 minus 2 is actually negative 4. So this negative 4 is actually my remainder. Okay, and here's a couple reasons why I know that the division process is done. One, we don't have any x's left. As soon as the degree of your divisor is more than the degree of what's left down here, this doesn't even have an x, then you're done. Another clue is we got to the very end of the dividend here, so we don't have any more terms to bring down. So that's another clue. Now, I do want us to be able to write our quotient. Remember, the quotient is the answer to the division problem. Our quotient is x squared minus x plus 2, but what you're going to do is take your remainder, negative 4, and put it over your divisor, and we're going to add that to our quotient. Okay, so when we have that at the end, that's representing the divisor. If you think about it, you know, at this moment, you're trying to take negative 4 and divide it by x squared plus x plus 1. It's just that we're not able to, so this is really representing where we had to stop. Okay, that's just a nice brief video on long division. Hopefully that helps you out if you get stuck in the future.